Welcome to Beyond the Lecture podcast. We're so excited for this week's episode. Today we have Dr. Michelle Burroughs, who serves as the Senior Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer for WSFS Bank. Dr. Burroughs brings 20 years of combined experience in community engagement, risk, operations, diversity, change management, and strategic planning, focused on identifying measurable outcomes with clear execution timelines. Dr. Burroughs is a passionate leader driven to promote inclusive organizational culture, consistently engaging with development of initiatives that assist with enhancing diversity and inclusion business practices. We're super excited to learn all about how our students can become the best and the brightest in this ever-changing, ever-evolving world. Stay tuned for Beyond the Lecture. And welcome to this episode of Beyond the Lecture podcast. I am super excited and grateful to have Dr. Michelle Burroughs here to talk with us today on the topic of diversity, inclusion, and corporate culture. So welcome to Beyond the Lecture podcast.
Hi, everybody. Oh, they talk back. That's good. Okay.
So, before we get started, I want to have a little bit of fun.
Okay.
And we're going to do this thing. What is your Mount Rushmore of artists? So, give me your top 4 artists.
Beyonce, of course.
Okay.
Is there anybody else? No, I'm serious. I listen to Beyonce.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I have not missed one concert. Like, I am diehard. I have to tell them. So for my birthday this year, I went to Beyonce in full silver, head to toe, everything, crown, boots,
Everything.
everything. Yes.
Yeah. So just Beyonce. All faces of Beyonce.
Y'all would be here for a long time for me to think of somebody else.
Okay.
I'm sure there is somebody, right? Like, I love Cardi B.
All right, so there we go. All right, so what is a song that you have on repeat right now that's not Beyonce?
Did I just say it? Okay.
You just said you listen to Cardi B, dude?
This is such a contradiction, but God Is by Melvin Crispell.
No, but that's my favorite gospel song.
Yeah.
God Is.
So
right.
yeah, that's my other one.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Jesus and Beyonce.
Won't he do it?
All right.
Okay.
Target or Walmart?
Walmart.
Okay. Louis Vuitton or Gucci?
Louis Vuitton.
Yes.
Or Dolce.
Or Dolce. One more. Silver or gold?
Silver. All day.
All day? Mm-hmm. Okay. Last one. Live concert or the recording?
Live.
Live. Okay. All right. So thanks for playing the game. Just wanted to warm you up a little bit, and we're going to get started. My first question to you is, as a Senior Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer, how do you define a truly inclusive corporate culture, and why is it important for both the employee and the business as a whole?
That's a loaded question, right? Because when you talk about culture, the first thing that you have to do is define what your culture is, right? So a lot of times people use this word culture, and if you ask them what their culture is, they can't put words to it, right? So really, when you're talking about inclusivity, the most important thing is whether or not everybody feels like they belong there. Right? So if you are one person that feels like you're out of place, or you're not heard, or you're not valued, I listen to that person right now at my job because I want to know, what is it that we're missing?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times with corporate companies, we do these employee engagement surveys and everyone celebrates, oh, we're the best place to work. But I usually challenge them and say, okay, well, that 10% right there, if you have a 90% score, that's amazing, because there can be two truths. You can be the best place to work, but you can also have 10% of your population that doesn't have that same experience. So we kind of ask them, like, I go out and say, well, what is it about your experience that isn't making you feel like the corporate culture is inclusive here, right? So it really to be inclusive, you really have to make sure you're paying attention to everybody, not just the majority.
Okay. That's good. I want to rewind a little bit, and because I know that they have heard your bio and things like that, but how did you get in this seat, right? So how did you get here to be able to share with us what that looks like for diversity and inclusion and be this expert for companies?
So when I talk about this, I always say I have lived and learned experiences, right? So my first experience was being a Black woman in America, right? So you live what we talk about. You experience bias, you experience discrimination, you experience racism, and a lot of that has to do with what I talk about. And it gives me the passion and really the credibility behind some of the things that we discuss in the forums that I talk in. My learned experiences are through work. So have all of you heard of something called resource groups? They're similar to the student organizations that you have, where you may have one for every demographic or different majors. So when you go to work, you have resource groups, and now they're based off of different life experiences. It could be LGBTQ+, it could be for Black associates, or we say associates, so you can say employees. We have one that we just started for parents. I'm not going to say what year, because some of y'all weren't here yet, but some time ago, I actually started some of the first ones in Delaware. So there were about 6 of us, and we were the first ones in the entire state of Delaware that started resource groups. And I got really passionate about it at that time because I got a chance to travel up and down the East Coast talking about diversity, what resource groups were, because they were new then, and it wasn't in response to George Floyd. We were doing it because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how my career kind of took a different turn, because I was like, you know what, I really want to do that. I want to be involved in conversations about how we can improve things. That's how I ended up here at Del State for 4 years, right? Like, how can I be closer to communities where we can make a difference and start changing the world that we live in?
Awesome. I love it. I love how you got an opportunity to marry your passion with what you do every single day for your lived and learned experience. So thank you for that.
And can I say something right there? Because that was powerful. You can create your own lane. So with some of these things, the jobs didn't exist back then, right? But we took conversations and we said, wow, I think this looks like something. So you got to practice advocating for yourself, presenting business cases in regards to how this could become a role for you. So we really, when we started doing these resource groups, we created a lane for a lot of that. And the resource groups are still here today.
I love that. When you see that there is a need or empty space, create the lane, create it for yourself so that you'll have it. I love it. So diversity goes just beyond race and gender, right?
Yes.
Can you share some examples of other aspects of diversity that companies should focus on, or just that we should know so that we can understand what that is?
One of the big things that I think sometimes we miss are disabilities, and it's not the ones that you just openly see, right? So one of the things that I've been focusing on this year is the difference between visible and invisible disabilities, right? So 25% of us have an invisible disability. So it's very likely that there are at least 5 people in here that are dealing with some level of invisible disability. When I say invisible disability, raise your hand if you have an idea of what you think that means. Okay, so an invisible disability could be something neurological. That could be ADHD, it could be OCD, it could be bipolarism. There's all of these things that we have that do impact how we learn, how we work, how we socialize. And believe it or not, when you have to show up to school or to work, that affects who you are as a person. Sometimes you are a little bit more tired because it takes more energy, even for you to be present here in this moment, right? So that's another level of disability that I think we don't really focus on enough. It's whether your sexual orientation is one. One that is huge that we're actually starting to see more people talk about is parents. Right? So there's different experiences for parents in the workplace. If you're a parent and you're trying to get through college, it's different, right? So diversity in experiences is something that I think is getting a little bit more traction right now.
And that's really good that you said that, because when you think about diversity, I think that we've been taught that diversity is race, gender, and all of those things, and even those invisible difficulties and things like that, and differences. But I would have never thought that parenting would be something that as a diversity. But I do understand that it's hard being a parent, going to school and maintaining your role at a job and things like that. So having a company or a culture that supports that is definitely important. And I think about some of our students that are parents in college, right? And how do we as administrators, as faculty and staff, have spaces and places for them too. So when we think about that, that is definitely something that I want to kind of really think through and make sure that we're honoring that, because everybody's not a traditional student.
Right, and differences in experiences is important because it affects how you show up. Right, and that's the part about diversity when you're talking about really looking at how you can increase like these cultures of belonging where people feel valued. Understanding their experience is important. Intersectionality is a really good term for you to learn if you don't know it. Kimberly Crenshaw created, I believe, somewhere in the 80s. And initially it was targeted more towards Black women, and really understanding that just because we both may be women doesn't mean that we have the same experience, right? So I've had to have very candid conversations with some of my peers sometimes that are not people of color, who would say, yeah, I get it, I understand, I know what it's like to walk into a room and be the only woman. And I would look at her and say, right, but you're not a Black woman, or you're not this, or you still can identify with them somehow. When I walk into the room, I can't identify with them at all.
Yeah.
That's a difference in experiences. So intersectionality is when you have multiple layers of characteristics that are marginalized, right? So if you're a woman, you're marginalized. If you're Black, you're marginalized. If you're a Black woman that's gay,
you're marginalized.
Right, so these are all different touch points that you have that add more stressors to you that actually increase the capability that you could experience bias and discrimination.
Yeah, wow. So we learned a new term, intersectionality. So making sure that you know what that looks like and how does that fall for you, and then when you're looking at these companies and these roles, how does that support you? So that kind of takes me into that question. For college students entering into the workforce, what key indicators should they look for when assessing whether or not a company's culture is truly diverse and inclusive, rather than they pay well and they have a good job?
So that's tough, right? Because when you show up to the interview to put your best foot forward, so are they, right? You don't really know until you know. One of the things that I've learned to become comfortable with, and that's pretty late in my career, just asking the question out loud, right? Like, so what is your diversity and inclusion culture, or how would you describe your culture? Ask them to explain their culture to you. And if they can't, that should give you some pause, because someone should be able to clearly talk about their culture of belonging. What are the steps that you're going to take when I get there to make sure that I'm set up for success? Yeah. That is a great question. Or are they going to push you through orientation and drop you off? Right? That's a fair question, because if you're brand new to the organization and you're also new to, if it's your first full-time job, you want a company that's going to try to set you up for success. Absolutely. I would tell people sometimes to go look at the website. If you don't see diversity and inclusion at all, sometimes that's a sign. But I will also say that doesn't guarantee anything. Right? So really learning the culture and finding out what questions you want to ask about the culture specifically is important.
That's good. That is good. From a leadership perspective, what do you believe are the biggest challenges that are faced when implementing DE&I initiatives? So if they do find this company and you don't see that, and you are that company, and maybe they get feedback and the student says, you know, I didn't take it because I didn't see these things. But from a leadership perspective, what are the biggest challenges you believe you face when implementing these initiatives?
So I've had the opportunity to start a few things from the ground up, like here at Dell State. I started with ERM, and then when I got to WSFS, I started with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would say it's similar for many things, not just diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's the education. When people don't understand it, it takes a lot to kind of bring people along. The unique piece about what I do with diversity is I'm now trying to increase awareness about something while also talking about something that people are not comfortable discussing. Right? So finding the balance between making sure that people understand that this is really about awareness and education, not about pointing fingers and finding blame, just trying to get to a common solution. That's tough because I have to sit in a room sometimes and try to push for conversations that are not comfortable. Things that you probably don't want to say out loud. You know that it's there, but you kind of want to. You don't want to be that one. Just talk around it, right? That's not my style though. So you have to sometimes figure out how to have candid conversations. I'm really big on being open, because I really feel like if you hide behind words, sometimes you lose the true meaning of what you're going to say. That works in relationships too. Just I said what I said, right? And mean what you say. That's the biggest way that you can get past some of this, is just transparency, and that's one of the bigger challenges.
I can see that, because people aren't always open and comfortable in themselves to say it. It's not that I don't want to say it, but I have never had practice, right, in saying that. And sometimes I've never said it out loud. I know what's going on, but I don't want to be the one, right, to open up that. So I can see why that is hard to really uncover and unlock. But I think that it is something that is courageous, and you have to do it if you want to see the results.
Right.
All right. So we have a few more questions. How can organizations go beyond recruiting diverse talent and actually retaining and promoting them, especially when it comes to creating career growth and opportunities for those underrepresented groups?
So that's my sweet spot right there.
All right. Well, let's stay here.
So one of the things that I think is very important is mentoring, but it has to be done in a structured way, because informal mentoring already happens all the time, but it's typically not for the underrepresented employees. Right? People getting pushed through the ranks. You're watching somebody, you working with somebody, you see somebody getting promoted, but it's because they have a sponsor or because they know someone, or when they came into the workplace, their parents knew somebody that introduced them. So, this social equity that they have a lot of times far exceeds what we have. If you're a student of color or someone coming out from a first generation graduate, you just don't have any of that. Right? It's almost like, the wealth equity gap. There's a social equity gap too.
Absolutely.
And so when you walk into the workplace, I think the mentoring programs are so important. So what I did at WSFS is I actually created a formalized mentoring program only for the resource groups. Now, the trick is I'm not excluding anyone. You have to be a member of a resource group though. Right? So you're going to either be in that, you're a part of that demographic, or you're willing to be a part of the resource group to learn about a demographic. So you are either a part of or you're going to learn about. Right? But this mentoring program that I created is about 9 months. And I was excited because after the first cohort we tested last year, 78% of them got promoted within 90 days of finishing it.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where you just kind of have to figure out how to, and I talked about this in a conversation recently. I think access is important because we don't have the same access. Resources are important, and exposure. That's what you have to do to make the difference.
Access, resource, exposure. And you said something, and I want you to go back, sponsor. Share with students what's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, because that's a difference, right?
And I'm going to add one, a coach.
And a coach.
So I'm actually a licensed coach, right? So you have a mentor who is somebody that just kind of talks to you about wisdom. So, hey, you may come to me and say, hey, Michelle, I want to know more about getting into diversity, equity, inclusion. How did you get there? And I'm just going to tell you. Right? You're not asking me for help on anything. I'm kind of just telling you, or if you want my advice, I'm just going to kind of tell you what to do based off of my own experience. That's mentoring. A coach is someone who says, okay, let me help you figure out all the noise that's going on in here so we can set the goals that you want to set for yourself, but I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to help you work through how to get from point A to point B, but you're going to figure it out. I'm just here to help narrate you through the process, right? A sponsor is somebody who at work typically is someone who is in a room that you're not in. right? So it's usually somebody pretty senior that knows to say your name when there's promotions happening, or if there's opportunities coming, if there's conferences that people want to go to. A sponsor is someone that you just kind of stay associated with, make sure that they understand what your achievements are, so that way when there's a time where your name needs to get dropped in a room, that sponsor is going to say, oh, I got one for you.
Yep.
That's a sponsor.
That's a sponsor. And you should have all three, right?
You
at
should.
some point.
You should have all three. Yeah.
Yeah, at some point. So just wanted to make sure when you heard the term sponsor, I know that that's used interchangeably. Make sure that you know what the difference is.
And a sponsor and a mentor can be the same person.
Yeah. To that, what role do you think mentorship and sponsorship plays in fostering workplace inclusivity in workplace, and how can college students seek out those opportunities early in their career?
I think it's critical.
Yeah.
Because the only way that we're going to change the disparities that we see with how people are moving into leadership is to have people in senior positions like mine go and say, look, this person has been here working just as hard. They have the same qualifications. They may have been even outperforming somebody, but we just didn't see them.
Yeah.
Because there may have been 1 out of 30. So this whole conversation about DE&I meaning that someone's not qualified, that's not true. That's just simply not true. It just means that I'm making sure that if there are 100 people in the room and there are 2 people of color, how can we make sure that we did not miss them because there's 98 other people to look at, right?
Yeah.
So mentors and sponsors are critical in that, because it's important for me to make sure that I'm advocating for that talent, which increases retention, increases associate satisfaction, right? But the way that you can do that is you have to figure out how to get comfortable with introducing yourself to people. That's a cultural thing also, right? Because as kids, we're raised to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to get past that. When you get into corporate America, you have to get to a point where you get comfortable with walking up to somebody, hi, and you say your name, you shake their hand. Ask somebody, can I set up 15 minutes to talk to you? They call them coffee chats, right? Set up coffee chats to meet with people. Go talk to somebody that you think wouldn't speak to you. Senior executives love when someone has the courage to come up to them and say, I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Right? That's how you break those barriers, because trust and believe it, you're not doing it, but somebody else is. Because a lot of times that privilege gives people the feeling that they feel like they can. You have the same privilege to walk up to somebody and introduce yourself.
I love that you said that, because it is true, right? We grow up and you're supposed to sit in the background. You respect your elders. You're not supposed to be in the conversation, right? You're around it. You're adjacent to it. But advocating for yourself and making sure that, one, they're human just like you are, but they have something that you want, you need. So introduce yourself and make sure that they know that.
Yeah, it starts with you. Like, they're not going to know who you are if you don't introduce yourself. That's the first step. Don't wait. Do not wait for somebody to walk up to you. That's how you'll miss an opportunity.
Okay. So as someone with extensive experience in DE&I, corporate culture, all of that, kind of segueing into what you just said, what advice would you give to college students as they start their job search in terms of finding a company that aligns with their values around diversity and inclusion and who they are?
Yeah. The first thing that I would say is make sure you understand what your passion is. Through a lot of conversations and through my research with my dissertation, I think one of the things that I've noticed is that we tend to just go look for the job.
Yeah.
Right? What is it that you want to do? You're at a very unique place now that you can say, hey, when I wake up every day, this is where I feel like, I got my swag on a little bit. I'm doing good. Does swag make me sound old? I don't know if swag's okay.
It's on.
But if you just kind of feel like, what makes you feel at the end of the day that you had a good day, right? That's where you should be looking for your career in. Like, what makes you feel good? Yeah. Before I did D&I, I was doing risk and compliance, right? I'm good at it, but my energy came out of that. So look for a company that you see doing things that you resonate with here, not here. Because that's where you'll know that you're a fit. And then you can walk in and say, okay, well, now what jobs do they have? But look for this connection first.
I love that. Because we are taught to chase the money, right? You chase the job, you chase the money, but you can have all of those things and not still feel excited, happy, fulfilled. So knowing and marrying that passion. And you talked about that in the beginning. You have to have that passion also with the role. So that was really good. So I have one more question for you, and then I'm going to allow for our students to ask you some questions.
Okay.
So looking ahead, what do you believe is the next frontier? I know that things are changing in the world and the way things are being done. Looking ahead, what do you believe is the next frontier for diversity and inclusion in the corporate world?
Okay. Honestly, I think the next frontier is going to really be figuring out how to operate in a way where it doesn't feel like it's separate from the company. Right now you have diversity, equity, inclusion, and everybody else. And I just had this conversation today, and I'm so thankful that, I currently I report to someone who gets it. The next frontier should be, how do we do DE&I as a company? It shouldn't just be the HR thing. It shouldn't just be Michelle running around trying to get everybody to talk about inclusion.
Yeah.
When you figure out how to integrate it into the fabric of the company, that's when it's going to work, because then you're not going to worry about, if everyone is doing it. It should just be an expectation. We should just be doing it because it's how we do human, right? You just want everybody to treat everybody the right way.
That was good. Say that again. It's how we do human.
I say that all the time. We just need to figure out how to do this thing called human.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. I think that these were some really great nuggets, valuable information. I am walking away looking at DE&I in a different way, diversity, and really looking at the landscape of it. Do you have it over here and it's just something that we're doing? Or is this a part of who we are as a culture? Have I thought enough about you that I want to create a culture that you don't feel like a diversity hire?
Right.
Or you don't feel like you got this, I made this special experience for you. But this is who we are because you're human, and it's not this versus that.
Correct.
So thank you for that. I am not going to hog all of your time because I absolutely love taking time with you, but I'm going to allow for our students now to ask questions, and I see a hand already raised. So we're going to have them stand up, say who they are, what their major is, and ask the question.
How you doing, Dr. My name is Ryan Jones. I'm a
Hi, Ryan.
major at Delaware State University. And you spoke a lot about your experiences as a Black woman in business. So I really just want to know, where does your confidence rise from just looking at it?
My confidence? Oh, that is a good question. So believe it or not, I did not always have it. I would say recently is where I got the majority of my confidence. And it really just came from me becoming more courageous first about just accepting that, you know what, I have a story and I'm going to tell my story the way that it is, and I'm not going to let other people's situation become my burden, right? So I'm kind of at this point in my life over whether or not someone else is comfortable. That's not my burden. If you'd like to learn more about me, so that way we can figure out why you're uncomfortable, that's fine, but I'm going to give that back to you, because a lot of times, especially as people of color, some of the discomfort we have is because we're still trying to figure out how we can be accepted by other people, right? Once you let that go, I mean, that's not on me. I am who I am. I'm not going to change that. You know, when we talk about how the world has changed, you know, how many of you have experience when someone's trying to describe somebody that's Black and they'll call you everything but Black? Like, oh, I met this girl named Yab. She had on a leopard colored shirt and some tan shoes. You know her. You know, she might be 5. And I'm like, oh, the Black woman?
Yeah.
Right. And I used to do that on purpose sometimes to get people to understand that it's okay to talk about, she gonna be Black tomorrow, right? So just call it what it is, right? It's stuff like that's where I got my confidence from, just realizing that there were things that were just unnecessarily uncomfortable.
That's good. Oh, they popping up. Then Brandon, go ahead. Yes.
Hello, my name is Jada. I major in business and I'm a freshman here at Delaware State University. And like, as you were growing up, how did you become like so comfortable in having conversation with people, and how did you find your passion in what you're doing today?
That is, I'm smiling because I'm actually very shy. Don't say that. So I'm an only child, and I actually grew up with a single mother who could not afford childcare. So I spent the majority of my life at home with no one to talk to, because when I grew up, I actually started watching myself when I was 6. I didn't realize how young that was until I became a mother. I could not imagine having to make that choice, right? So I knew when I came in, I had to close the door behind me, and I didn't pick up the phone unless my mother, this is back when we didn't have cell phones. Yeah. The phone rings 2 times, hang up, call back. I know that's my mom, so I can answer the phone. I didn't get those social skills. It wasn't until, again, going back to Ryan's point, it was much later in my life, and that's why I love doing this, right? Because I like for people to see that a lot of, when you see this is not who I was then. I was, we were using peroxide and baking soda trying to make toothpaste. Yeah. Right? How many people know that, right? So I get that, right? So that's the reason why I like to come back and talk, because I'm like, the sky's the limit. I didn't finish my undergrad. I don't know if you know this, I didn't finish my undergrad until I was 28. I did that math recently because I couldn't afford to stay in school, right? I had to go back to work. And then I realized that I was so good at my job, I actually got promoted, but then I hit a cap where they were like, okay, well, if you want to keep going, it's not going to be competitive if you don't have your undergrad. So I went back. I didn't graduate with my undergrad until I was probably 31. So I like to tell these stories because I'm like, I don't want anyone to ever feel discouraged by your experience, but that's where my confidence comes from, is that lived experience where I'm like, look, we all in here just trying to do the best that we can, right? And at the end of the day, if you can see somebody that looks like you on the end of it that says, you know what, I did it, so can you, that's really where my confidence comes from.
Yeah, because it's like right now, like I'm really just trying to figure it out. Like, really just get close to the guy, figure out my own journey, and like really just do my own thing, on my own movie. Like, because at the end of the day, we is just all human. We all gonna make mistakes. Like, everything not perfect. Like, so just stuff like that. I think.
And I like what you said, because I actually just learned something a week ago when I was doing a conversation with Haben Girma. She's actually, imagine this, she's deaf, blind, and black, and just graduated from Harvard. Wow. And so I sat down and had not just graduated, she's the first deaf, blind, black woman to graduate from Harvard Law School. And I had a conversation with her, and you have to type on a machine to talk to her, because it's like the modern day Helen Keller, right? And so as I'm typing, there's like this little machine that she's holding that kind of produces Braille real time. And so I typed, I got my nails cut, but I'm still messing up, right? And so I kept trying to hit the back key, and she said, don't worry about the back key, because when you make a mistake, you can't erase it, just move on. Ooh. Because, a mistake happens real time, right? So by the time I realized I had a typo, it already sent the message to her. Yeah. Just like in life, you make the mistake, it happens. She was like, just keep moving. So I would make the mistake and just keep typing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think he was first. Yep. I know.
But once again, hi everyone, my name is Brandon Poplar, a junior finance and law studies scholar here at Delaware State University. And my question for you is about imposter syndrome. As we have DEI incorporated with a lot of corporations, and there's a lot of minorities who it will be their first time in these middle and high management positions. How have you dealt with imposter syndrome if you've had it?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that 2 ways. I'm just going to ask all of you to, if there's nothing else you take away from tonight, no matter what race you are, if you're a woman, if you're a person of color, please do not let anyone apply imposter syndrome to you. That is not applicable. Imposter syndrome implies that you are responsible for the way that you feel. How many of you have felt excluded because of your race? Raise your hand. Did you make that up? Or is there a world that has treated you differently because of your race? What about your gender? How many people have felt differently because of your gender? Was that something you made up? That's not, so you're not an imposter in that experience, correct? Yeah. Right. The way that you manage through those experiences, though, and how you deal with it, which is why we talk about coaches and mentors. Sometimes therapy works too, right? So sometimes having to deal with these things, which are actually recurring trauma, this is what creates self-limiting beliefs. So because you've had these recurring traumas, now it impacts whether or not you believe you can do something, whether or not you can see yourself doing something, which is why I'm sitting here, because I'm saying you can, right? That's what you can control. It's your self-limiting beliefs, right? You get a support system behind you that can help you work through that. But imposter syndrome, no. You are not an imposter in your experience.
It's good. Nothing.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Jacoby Bellman. I'm a marketing major here at Delaware State University. It's a pleasure to meet you. As I was listening to the panel tonight, I was thinking in the back of my mind, especially what's going on in today's society, how do you as a Black woman constantly have in the back of your mind that I'm going to continue to break barriers regardless if they're near or far, and how would you encourage young people of color, and women especially because of what we're going through now in the public eye, to keep going no matter what limitations are in front of you because of how important it is?
Oh, okay. So for me, it's not easy. I go home and cry sometimes. It's not easy. It's not easy to stand in front of a room and advocate for things that are happening to me as if it's not happening, right? I often have to stand in a room and teach. I have to teach a class next week on implicit bias after having an out-of-body experience yesterday, right? I almost canceled the class, to be honest. I don't want to talk about it, right? Those are very human. Again, we're human, right? Those are very human moments. It is not easy, but I continue to do what I do because of y'all. And because of my daughter. Many people have heard me speak. I say, I'm trying to make the world better for my kids.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can make sure I can guarantee. Every single touch point that I have is trying to make sure if I can open another door. So when you graduate, did I open a door for you? Am I making sure that my daughter who has special needs, I can trust the world with her when I'm no longer here? How can I make sure she's going to be okay?
Yeah.
Right? That's what keeps me motivated. Do I think the world's going to change overnight? No. But what is the small part that I can do to make things easier for the next generation? That's the only thing that I can guarantee that I can work on, right? Because you have to have something to continue to motivate yourself. And when I think about just that promise of tomorrow, I always just kind of say that you kind of have to figure out what can you control. Focusing on the things that you can't, you're going to get lost in it.
Yeah.
You're going to get lost in it.
Thank you.
And I will say, to your point, one quote that I always end my classes one quote that I always end my classes with is, there's never one raindrop that believed it was the cause for the flood. There's nothing too small that you can do, because it only took one raindrop for that flood to happen, right? So everything that you do matters.
Good. I think we have some more questions over here. Go ahead.
It's nice to meet you. My name is Jake Cordova. I'm a freshman here at Del State as well as a marketing major. My question is, as you brought up your example of raising many people in the room and two maybe diverse to color, that you make sure that those two are understood and that they're understanding of what's at hand. So how do you do that and make sure that they're good when it's a room full of 100 colored people? And you make sure that everybody is still understanding, grasping what needs to be grasped. Same
concept, right? Because now you're just talking about diversity of thought. So another ground rule that I typically set when I lead a class is to have one ground rule where I say, you can step up by stepping back.
Yeah.
Right? If you realize that you have a very strong personality and you are the one person in the room that has the most to say, become more self-aware of that and just say, you know what, I'm going to yield the space over here for this person, to allow someone who may just need more time to process. Give them a chance to be heard. Because at the end of the day, you want everyone to feel heard and valued and seen. So sometimes stepping up and being a leader in the room means stepping back and yielding space. And that's sometimes what I encourage people to do to make sure that all the voices are heard. And that's just regardless of any race, any culture, anything. We just need to be more self-aware sometimes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for two more questions. Go ahead.
My name is Ari Jenkins. It's nice to meet you. I'm a business management major at Delaware State University. And you talked about how educating people who feel uncomfortable with diversity is hard. And I'd like to ask you, what is the biggest challenge that you experience within your career when trying to educate those people, and how did you address that?
Okay, one challenge. I think the biggest challenge I had early on was just getting people to figure out how to talk about race openly, right? There's this stigma where we are afraid to talk about it. We kind of have to here because in our country, we're really the primary country that makes race the front of the issue. In other countries, your nationality is what's important. I remember when I started traveling globally and people were asking me what I was looking for, Black. And it was like, oh, they just want me to say I'm American. Oh, got it. Right? So since we're here and we have to talk about it, that was always my biggest challenge. And honestly, going back to what I said earlier, the way that I address it is I just force the issue. But I also I try to balance it with humor. I don't know if people always get my jokes. I think I'm funny. I'm not, people don't always laugh at what I say. You guys didn't laugh just now. So, it's one of those things where, I just try to make people understand that we're just having a conversation where it's about learning, because I think sometimes there are people in these roles that take an approach that's a little bit more aggressive or assertive that make people uncomfortable. It's about finding the common ground, the human ground, right? That's kind of how I try to address it.
Mm-hmm. Nice. All right. One last question. Is anybody? One more? All right. Okay. Oh, there we go.
Oh, we had one more too. Okay.
My name is Jaden Rogers. I'm a junior, MIS major here at Delaware State. I think that HBCU students have a unique situation where we get to spend a lot of time with other Black students. And while our university does do a good job of placing us around diverse people and collaborating with them, what advice would you give an HBCU student, or how can we prepare to transition into a workplace that's inevitably going to be Caucasian, predominantly Caucasian?
The world you live in is. Your life has prepared you for that, right? So I would not come, and I get this question a lot about HBCUs, and I'm like, don't forget that this is just a part of your experience. The world that you live in already looks like that, right? So just remembering, like, how did you navigate through the world before you got here is one thing, but when you go into the workplace, you can still take some of the same values that you learned here. Everybody just looks different, right? It's not necessarily, so if you walk into a classroom, you still have cliques, right? If you're, I don't know I'm Greek, so I don't know. But, it's like, are you Greek or are you not Greek? All these things. That's the same thing. The skill sets that you learned, right, and those situations are the same ones that you fit when you go into the workplace, right? And how did you figure it out when you walked on the campus? You didn't know anybody. You worked through trying to figure out who your circle was going to be. It's all the same thing. The skill sets that you get in college are the same skill sets that you're going to use in the workplace, regardless of what someone's race is.
Yeah.
Do not overthink that part, because that's where you'll start to lose parts of yourself. I could talk another 30 minutes on covering. You know who you are when you leave here. You know how to navigate the space that you were in here. Take those same skills, and when you start to feel like, if you start to feel like you're not seen or heard, the one thing I will say, because this is another thing that sometimes we do as people of color, we withdraw if we feel like we're not heard.
Yeah.
Fight that. Because if you withdraw, you're not helping, you're not doing anything. There's no guarantee that anyone's ever going to come back and say, well, why aren't you talking? If you withdraw, typically what's going to happen is they're going to say you're disengaged, right? So that's the only thing I will say, because in an HBCU, you sometimes will have staff, counselors, or somebody that will pull you back in. You're not in class, let me call you, right? When you go into the workplace, that's the one difference that you're going to have to hold yourself accountable for. When you don't feel seen and heard, do not withdraw. Figure out a way to get another angle in.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I think,
That was the guy in the pink. Are you done?
No, you good?
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for this wonderful.
This was fun.
I'm not even gonna call it a conversation, right? This was a life-changing, transformative moment. Like, you had so many gems and nuggets that our students are walking away with. So I just wanted to take the time to thank you again for helping us go beyond the lecture.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Lecture. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to take your business knowledge to the next level. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries, stay curious, and remember, the learning never stops when you're going beyond the lecture.